We're on page, you better watch it, Cody. We're on page 48 in your workbook. We're talking about tone and mood. So, what do you think this first blank is going to be? Tone is the blank of the author or the characters towards a subject. So we know tone. It's just been a minute since we talked about that definition. I'll give you a hint. It starts with an A.
Attitude.
Attitude.
That is not what I'm thinking.
Tone is the attitude
I thought it was like.
of the author or characters towards a subject. We're going to get a new marker.
On page 48.
Look.
I stole it from the conference room. Don't tell anybody. Hopefully one of these.
I don't call anyone.
Jackson, you already switched on me. Does that work? Can you see that?
No.
You can't. High maintenance children. Cody, now
I can
you
see
can
that
go
one.
at me. We'll make it work.
I can see the blue better.
So we've got tone. I think it'll be better in the light. Mood is how the reader feels. So this is where we get into feelings. Pretty much. Mood is how the reader feels or the emotions / feelings evoked by the work. Can anybody tell me what evoked means? What does that word mean? Forced, engage. I like these synonyms because what it means is to bring to mind. So when an author is writing something, the goal is for you to feel something. He is not. Can you give me that book, Jesse? Yes, thank you. He's not trying to just make you feel nothing. He wants you to feel a certain way. And so that's what we call mood. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the reading last night that I'm sure that you all did, every single word of it. Yeah.
I did it in class, yeah.
That's good. And we're going to say, okay, what is the tone of this section? Now, when we're asking ourselves, what is the tone, you're going to have to read it. You can't just like look at a couple words and be like, I think the tone is this. I mean, you could do that, but you're probably going to be wrong. So when we're trying to figure it out, we've got to have evidence to back us up. So before we can answer this question, what is the tone of this chapter, we have to look at what does the author do in that chapter. So as we reread these 3 pages, or these few pages, we're going to be looking at figurative language. We're going to be looking at the event, what happens in the chapter, and then we're going to be looking at word choice. Does anybody remember what our fancy literary term is for word choice? Starts with a D.
Didn't know what it meant.
As in
And then I had to look at the question.
diction. Write that down. Diction is an author's word choice.
When we're at the side.
You can write it to the side if you want. So once you finish writing that word, we're going to go back to page 497 because that's where this chapter starts. The End of the World, Part 1. Now already, just from the title, I can start to make a guess about what this tone is going to be. Based on the title, The End of the World, Part 1, do we think the end of the world is going to be positive or negative?
Positive.
Negative. Thank you, Charlize. Okay, so from the start, for those of you who have a heart and are not crazy, when we read something like the end of the world, we think, oh, this is not good. So from the very beginning, we have a negative feeling. It's the end of the world, Cody. Okay, so we're on page 497. Cody, I'm very concerned about you. 497, The End of the World, Part 1. We're looking at figurative language, events, and diction. Again, I offer you a glimpse of the end. Perhaps it's to soften the blow for later, or to prepare myself for the telling. Either way, I must inform you that it was raining on Himmel Street when the world ended for Liesl Memminger. The sky was dripping. Like a tap that a child has tried its hardest to turn off but hasn't quite managed. The first drops were cool. I felt them on my hands as I stood outside Frau Diller's. Above me, I could hear them. Through the overcast sky, I looked up and saw the tin can planes. I watched their stomachs open and the bombs drop casually out. They were off target, of course. They were often off target. A small, sad hope. No one wanted to bomb Himmel Street. No one would bomb a place named after heaven. Would they? Would they? The bombs came down, and soon the clouds would bake and the cold raindrops would turn to ash. Hot snowflakes would shower to the ground. In short, Himmel Street was flattened. So right there we have an example of figurative language that I'm going to pause and write down. Yes, Cody?
Figure language, the sky is melting.
Good. The sky is melting. So we're going to write down Cody's example. The sky is melting. And we also have hot snowflakes would
Yes.
shower. When he says hot snowflakes, what does he mean? Ashes. Good. Good connection. Ashes falling from the sky. In general. Good or bad?
Good.
Well, wonderful. I want to consider where they're at.
Bad.
Volcano.
Bad. Thank you, Nicholas. We've got some bad reasons, or bad situation going on if you've got ashes. Okay, so we continue at the top of page 498. Sorry, Jesse. Sorry. Houses were splashed from one side of the street to the other. A framed photo of a very serious-looking Fuhrer was bashed and beaten on the shattered floor. Yet he smiled in that serious way of his. He knew something we all didn't know, but I knew something he didn't know. All while people slept. Rudolf Steiner slept. Mama and Papa slept. Frau Holzapfel, Frau Diller, Tommy Muller, all sleeping, all dying. Only one person survived. Cody, stop laughing. She survived because she was sitting in a basement reading through the story of her own life, checking for mistakes. Previously, the room had been declared too shallow, but on that night, October 7th, it was enough. The shelves of wreckage cantered down, and hours later, when the strange, unkempt silence settled itself in Moleking, the local LSC could hear something. An echo. Down there, somewhere, a girl was hammering a paint can with a pencil. They all stopped with bent ears and bodies, and when they heard it again, they started digging. Past items, hand to hand. Blocks of cement and roof tiles. A piece of wall with a dripping sun painted on it. An unhappy-looking accordion, peering through its eaten case. Okay, so you are probably running out of room just like I am, but we've got another example of figurative language. Yes, an eaten case. An unhappy accordion. Misspelled accordion. It's fine. To describe the accordion as unhappy, what literary device is that? Good. Thank you, Jamie. Personification. Because an accordion can't be unhappy. It's just a thing. And yet here we have this unhappy accordion. Top of page 499, they threw all of it upward. When another piece of broken wall was removed, one of them saw the book thief's hair. The man had such a nice laugh. He was delivering a newborn child. I can't believe it. She's alive. There was so much joy among the cluttering, calling men, but I could not fully share their enthusiasm. Earlier, I'd held her papa in one arm and her mama in the other. Each soul was so soft. Farther away, their bodies were laid out like the rest. Papa's lovely silver eyes were already starting to rest, and Mama's cardboard lips were fixed half open, most likely the shape of an incomplete snore. To blasphemy like the Germans, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. The rescuing hands pulled Liesel out and brushed the crumbs of rubble from her clothes. Young girl, they said, the sirens were too late. What were you doing in the basement? How did you know? What they didn't notice was that the girl was still holding the book. She screamed her reply, a stunning scream of the living. Papa! A second time, her face creased as she reached a higher, more panic-stricken pitch. Papa, Papa! They passed her up as she shouted, wailed, and cried. If she was injured, she did not yet know it, for she struggled free and searched and called and wailed some more. She was still clutching the book. She was still holding desperately onto the words who had saved her life. So for our next box, events, what has happened in these pages? Some significant things. Hmm? They got kaboomadooed, or Himmel Street is bombed. Now, based on what we read, did they mean to bomb Himmel Street? Were the Allies like, yes, this is a major target, we've got to eliminate this road? No, it's implied that it was an accident, that they weren't aiming for Himmel Street at all, because Himmel Street was just a bunch of civilians. It wasn't like they were hitting the capital. So, what happens to everyone?
They hide.
I think they did.
Everyone dies.
Except for one person.
Good. Except one. Who lives?
I don't know.
Diesel.
Except Liesel.
Oh, that.
That girl. She shows up a couple times.
Not the main character, but
I mean, she's the main
Pretty
character.
good.
Now, but anybody else.
She died.
she's an everyone.
That's terrible, Cody.
I've seen plenty of shows.
She's the only character now.
Okay, we're almost done with this first one. Now, there are lots of examples of diction in this section. It's any time the author chooses a certain word. So I'm going to give you one example. On page 499, it says, she was holding desperately on. I'm going to underline that word desperately. Onto the words who had saved her life. In that sentence, do we have to have the word desperately? Or does the sentence still work without it?
It doesn't sound as good as how it does.
There we go. It doesn't sound as good. If I take out desperately, it just says she was holding on to the words. It works, it makes sense, but it's not as good. So adding that word desperately, that's a choice. That's an example of diction. He could have said she was holding tightly, she was holding a little, but he makes a choice. He says, I'm going to say she was holding on desperately, and that single word tells us a lot about Liesel's emotional state. At the end of these 3 pages, at the end of page 499, how would you describe her emotional state? Gabe's shaking his head. It's not good, because she's just emerged out of the basement, and what does she look at when she sees Himmel Street? It's been flattened. Everything and everyone is gone. So that single word tells us kind of like how she's doing, just with a single word. So now we get to the question, what is the tone of this chapter? And I have all of this evidence to back up my statement. I've looked at the figurative language, which was these horrible images. I've looked at the events. Very sad things happened. It had a very negative title. And then we have this diction that reveals how bad Liesel is doing. So I'm going to choose 2 words for the tone. I'm going to say that the tone is violent. We could say tragic.
Happiness.
That would be good. We're not going to say happiness. So we're going to say violent / tragic / devastated. We're using slashes because it's all the same tone. We're just using multiple words to describe it. What does devastated mean? Do anybody know? Eli, what'd you say? Good. Completely ruined. When you are devastated, something has wrecked you. And so, as Death is telling us about all of these things, is his attitude joyful? Like, guess what I did at work today? No. He's very sad as he describes all these things. So all of these words fit our tone. Now, flip to the back. So we've got our first page. On the back, you're going to continue. You're going to look at the next two sections, then you're going to do the same thing that we did together, and then you're going to take those notes, and you're going to submit them in Schoology.